Okay, welcome everyone to Talks from the Hub with me, David Watkin, and my very special guest, our visiting professor, Pedro de Alcantara. Pedro's been a hugely important part of the kind of philosophy that underpins the string department here at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. And I just want to ask you, Pedro, a little bit about how you continually refresh yourself, in fact, we've got a couple of your books here on the music stand behind. And I remember the first time I encountered you was many, many years ago, and I think 10 pages into your book, Indirect Procedures, I put the book down and said, I have to find a way of meeting this guy.
Nice, thank you.
And I think that was last century, right?
Quite right.
Yeah. But since then, you've completely rewritten that book. So when I brought you here for the very first time, a fear in the back of my mind was, the trouble is, all my students will know where I get all my great ideas from. And then I watched you teaching, and I realized that actually you'd moved on. So you've never stood still. Just tell us a little bit about it.
All right, thank you. First, I'm very happy to be here, super happy. Happy to come back to the Conservatoire after 2 years of confinement. It's a delight to be here, and I cannot thank you enough for having brought me here. It's great, it's wonderful. Now, you're right off the bat hitting upon a very important point that is difficult to explain and describe. I risk talking incoherently about this, but it's kind of a big deal. In the old times, 500 years ago, people talked about a genius, like somebody had a genius. There was a force outside of the person helping the person. So a great artist 500 years ago had a genius, a force outside. And then time flies, and we come to, say, the 20th century, and then a guy is a genius. It's like it's something in your mind, you are a genius. But in the old times, like, there's something around you helping you. And for me, in the way I think about it, creativity or being creative is not something that you have in your brain or in your mind. It's an availability for the things all around you. And then it's not as if that you are creative, you are available to creativity. And if you are available to creativity, creativity is eternal, and it's all pervasive, it's a big thing, and it renews itself constantly. And if you're available to this thing, it renewing itself constantly, you will be renewed constantly through the creativity passing through you, because you are kind of a vessel for a flow. And somehow I got hang of this feeling or this idea. Many years ago, I'm going to say 25 years ago, I was taking some writing classes. At the time that I was trying to write my first book, I said, I'm going to study some writing. I was taking this writing class, and one day I wrote a poem. A short but good poem, like well structured, with some rhythm, with very nice words, with that ambiguity that's proper to poetry. And after I finished writing the poem, I said, that's it. I probably will never be able to write another thing again. And a week later, I wrote another poem, quite good too. And it was a kind of a breakthrough, where I understood that I wasn't creative, I was available to creativity, and it never runs out. You can't run out of ideas, because those ideas are passing through you. And that's the other thing you said very sweetly, that you brought me here. People would find out that you stole all my ideas. And it's not really true, because those ideas are not mine. They pass through me. I don't have a feeling of ownership of those ideas. They pass through me, I share them with you, they are yours, and you're going to use them in your own way, and generously you will pass them on to other people. So at the same time that I feel that creativity is not something that resides in my brain, but that I'm available to creativity, I feel that if it's passing through me and I don't own it, the passage is very fluid, and it just keeps happening again and again and again and again. Further, I don't really think of myself as a teacher, but as a learner. I come here and for instance, I heard a quintet for piano and strings by a French composer, Paul Leflemme. I had never heard of that composer, and I had never heard that piece. So I came here to learn about a piece I had never heard before. It was interesting. Then comes this cellist, young American cellist, and he's good at improvising and such like. So I came here to listen to a fine young musician improvise on his own accord. So I learned from him, or about his scordatura, or his burst of creativity was great. And in the moments where I don't feel that I am a teacher, I think that changes the dynamic with the student or the group, and it changes the way I perceive information and I share it, because I'm not really giving or imposing information. I have my co-learners. They're helping me understand things better. They're helping me think more clearly. They're helping me study a new score. They're helping me figure out some problem. So it's highly collaborative, I think, with the students. I can tell that now I'm going blah, 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 and talking too much non-stop. So let me take a break. David, save me from my blah, blah. Thank you.
So this is fascinating, Pedro. Thank you. And but what we haven't said about you is that you're also an extremely accomplished cellist. So you have had sort of proper cello training. And I'm just interested in what you're saying about your approach to learning, as you call it, or teaching. And I think what you were saying was you do your best teaching when you're available to that learning yourself.
Yeah.
And I recognise that. And I think there's a playfulness and a curiosity with what you do, which is infectious.
Thank you.
But what I wonder if you'd reflect a little bit on your cello, the cello teaching that you received. Do you think there are elements of that approach that you've got from there, or have you kind of started something new or broken a cycle of kind of guru pupil?
All right. Big question, big complicated question, and I risk talking incoherently about this. And once you acknowledge that you risk talking incoherently, you can speak quite well. You can edit, but I speak very freely. Yeah. So by simply acknowledging that the question is big and it's bigger than me, then I relax. I say I don't know what to say really, but I will improvise something having to do with my cello training, and I'll start by saying I think you're making an assumption about the kind of training that I received as a cellist. The training that I received was rather unorthodox and piecemeal. I started the cello very late. I was 12 years old when I took my first lesson. I was a very awkward, disembodied child, and my first cello teacher was a friend of the family, a German lady who had immigrated to Brazil. I grew up in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and who had been the principal cellist of an orchestra that by then already didn't exist. And this old lady was losing her mind. She was going senile. So my first teacher for 4 years was a sweet old lady going senile, and I was very awkward. And I was an awkward, half self-taught teacher for 4 years, which by no means an orthodox kind of cello training, right? Then I changed cello teachers, and my next teacher had trained in Europe with André Navarra, one of the great French cellists. He was an economist by training, but was a good cellist. I took a year of lessons, and from that year, I only remember one thing. One day he said, "Pedro, you sound like crap." And I don't remember what else he taught me for a year, but I do remember this one thing. He probably meant it very well, but a sensitive kid, sensitive introvert who was very awkward, and you tell the guy, "You sound like crap." Well,
that goes in deep.
That goes in deep. And then, I had a sequence of teachers. Except for my very first teacher, I never studied with the same teacher for more than 3 years, and one after the other. And interesting people, they were friendly, they were trying to help me, and not everybody told me that I sounded like crap. And the guy who told me probably meant something very well by it, but I may have misunderstood, maybe I misremember it. But, a sequence of disparate teachers, and there was a plus and a minus to it. The minus is that for the awkward kid starting late, not to have a solid base, yeah, it's a bit of a handicap. Mm-hmm. And the plus is that, in fact, my personality, my way of thinking, my temperament, I ultimately I'm essentially an intuitive, and out of intuition I try to what's the word? Understand something or encapsulate or systematize it. And it was very good for me, retroactively, to have had a series of unrelated cello teachers, including an old lady who was not doing well when she was my teacher, as my first teacher, because that almost obliged me to, over decades, become intelligent about my own cello playing. And that was the real plus. That worked for my personality. So yes, I played the cello, I learned the repertoire, I recorded a CD, I entered a couple competitions, the usual stuff. But the primary thing about my cello learning was meeting disparate teachers and trying to synthesize it in a way that it was going to be suited to me. And because I had been that very awkward late beginner, to understand the basic principles that you can help other people who are feeling awkward as beginners and who have problems. Mm-hmm. So probably I became a good problem solver more than becoming a good cellist or something like this. My path forwards was not so much, I'm going to be a great cellist, but rather, I have some problems, I need to solve them. Okay, I'm beginning to solve them. Okay, I think I can help other people solve some of their problems too. And then one thing that happened, soon I'll stop my blah blah and David will ask an intelligent question. Then what happened over many, many years is that I started using the cello in a new way for me. Doing a lot of scordatura, which is unorthodox tuning, like you lower the C string to an A or something like this. Or there are all sorts of combinations of tuning that you can do. And I would play and sing. I would play and whistle. I would play with the cello upside down on my lap. And I started composing interesting pieces out of this different cello or new cello. So I would say the two main things in my life as a cellist was this unorthodox training that I synthesized to some degree, and then the fact that I started using the cello in a very different way to express that creativity that was passing through me. And then one of the things that I like doing, for instance, when I come here, is to help with those students who might be a little bit blocked or afraid, get rid of the fear, take a risk, do something new and different, and perhaps start improvising, start doing scordatura, compose something, make an arrangement, play and talk, play and sing, play and free yourself, and let that creativity pass through you rather than saying, I just have to follow the score, Mm-hmm. Well, following the score is quite a skill, it's good, I'm not against it. And the idea is that you learn to follow the score, and then you learn to do something other than the score. The talking is it's fatiguing.
So I'm just going back to my very first meeting with you,
Uh-huh.
where I think that was the day I discovered that despite being an accomplished professional cellist,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't play by ear at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Right.
And in fact, I remember you saying something about my improvisation,
Mm-hmm.
which was not very encouraging.
Oh, no kidding, I said, you sound like crap, David.
Yeah, exactly.
I took my revenge on him.
But what I did was from that day forth, I said, right, I'm going to teach myself
Uh-huh.
to play by ear.
Right.
Every day for a year, I'm going to think of a melody
Mhm.
and play it in different
Right.
keys, think of the bass line and play that in different keys.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me about 2 weeks to get
2 weeks,
to
that's good.
to get to a point where I could connect my ears and my fingers.
Uh-huh.
But it's that, I think one of the things I've noticed you doing for me and for other people is connecting their playing with their creativity.
Mm-hmm.
My next question is, is it easier for you and the thousands of musicians, and not just musicians, but people in other walks of life that you've worked with over the years, is it easier for you to work with somebody or let's change the question, is it more satisfying for you to work with somebody who is naturally gifted physically and very well taught, or somebody who, as you've described yourself, more physically awkward as an early learner and not well taught or not systematically taught?
Okay, thank you. First, let me correct you. I don't think I have worked with thousands of people. I probably have worked with hundreds of people. Some people take only one lesson, some people take years of lessons, but all counted, I'm not sure if I've gotten to 4 figures yet. Let's say I've met and taught 998 musicians and students of the years, and the next couple of years I'll go over to the 1,000, but let's say hundreds rather than thousands. But that's just a minor detail. You're raising a really, it's a big question, and I risk talking incoherently about it. No, that's the thing about David. He's a smart guy, and he knows a lot, and his questions are too meaningful. And the more meaningful a question, the harder it is to address it or answer it, to say anything about it, and in particular to say something intelligent about it. So your question's a very big deal. And since I'm giving myself permission to talk, perhaps incoherently about it, I choose a starting point to address the question, a question that is just too big. And sometimes I ask a question in my mind, or somebody asks a question in my mind. Let's say somebody's interviewing me in my imagination. And in my imagination, the guy asks, Pedro, what is the greatest pleasure in life? And then I think about that, and I think the greatest pleasure in life is that pleasure of creativity passing through you. You create something. You know, the creation is manifested in a lot of different ways. You may create an improvisation or a composition. You may create a solution for a problem. Creativity sometimes means you create a child, you become a father. I don't have children, so I haven't had that creativity to me. But the pleasure of creativity is absolutely incredible. And you see that with little kids who are playing and who create something, and their eyes light up, and then they have to share, Mom, look what I did, it's great. The child created something, and it's very exciting. It's pleasure number 1. Pleasure number 2, which is totally related to it, is the healing, the solving of a problem, or a problem that becomes less important, or a worry of yours that dissipates. So you heal yourself from something, from a worry, from a handicap, from something that you didn't know how to do. You learn to speak a certain language, you go to a foreign country, and at first you can't say anything in that language, and then you heal yourself from the incapacity to speak the language. And that's an incredible, wonderful experience. You know, if you've had some health problem, let's say I had a long-standing problem with my left foot. What's it called? Plantar fasciitis?
Yeah.
Something like this. It's a very disagreeable thing. You wake up in the morning and your foot's hurting. I went to see a doctor. He said, put an insole in your shoe, do this, do that. I had a callus in the bottom of my foot. It was very disagreeable. And I met a fellow who, at a conference, we met in wonderful circumstances, just outside the conference building, the two of us, suddenly alone. And we met as if we knew each other already. It was very interesting. And that fellow walks barefoot full-time, has done so for decades, in all weathers, in all settings. He was barefoot when we met. I was wearing shoes. We get talking. He was full of energy, full of wisdom, full of human warmth. And thanks to him, I started exploring barefoot walking. And sooner rather than later, my plantar fasciitis disappeared. That means I was healed of a problem that was long-standing and disagreeable, and the healing is an incredible pleasure. It's just incredible. You feel a lot of gratitude. Like I have a lot of gratitude to the fellow who helped me walk barefoot. So creativity is a big pleasure, healing is a big pleasure, and a fantastically big pleasure is witnessing somebody else go through a healing process. Somebody else go from awkward to comfortable, or incapable to capable, or upset to joyful. That's incredible. So in my work, that students may be highly trained or not trained, I would say it's immaterial, because the primary thing is to be in the creativity, in the healing, in the witnessing, and in the sharing. And this happens to every person in a very particular way, even though the principle of healing and sharing is universal, but the manifestation is very individual. And in my days here in the Conservatoire, some of the students are very healthy and very accomplished and very sure, and they play wonderfully well. It's fantastic to be with them. And some have a few problems, and sometimes the problem is substantial, and we work together. The problem dissipates, and you witness the renewal, the transformation. That's fantastic. Really super.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear, and thank you for your work with our students. I don't know if you can hear my tummy rumbling. I think it's time for us to go and have some sushi.
We have to heal ourselves from our hunger. And food is a very good way to heal hunger. Yeah, that's good. Sushi. We'll go to Nuku Nuku down the block.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you.